What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full time anime man, and I am here with part 8 of What If Deku Had Maleficent's Powers. Now, before I get started with the story, I would like to say it's about that time that we're going to need to pick a name for Izuku. So if you all would do me a favor, comment a hero name for Izuku, I'd really appreciate that a lot. Also, Ice Wolf, part 8, maybe 7, I forgot. When's that one coming out? Uh, the script is done, it's just, I'm kind of having doubts about my work now, and that's really not healthy. I'm pretty sure it'll be out sometime in about some weeks. I don't know when, but like, it's coming. But with that out of the way, this is What If Deku Had Maleficent's Powers, Part 8. Hope you enjoy. Where we last left off, Izuku and Todoroki were about to go up against each other in the 1v1 in the sports festival. They stood on opposite ends of the battlefield awaiting for Midnight's signal. Begin, said Midnight. Todo-chan then quickly conjured ice next to Izuku in an attempt to knock him out of the ring. But he dodges. She throws ice again, but Izuku dodges once again. Todo-chan gets irritated and says,
"Stop dodging and fight already."
She throws ice at Izuku again, but Izuku redirected it. Izuku speaks, No, I won't fight until you use your fire side. Todo-chan would then grind her teeth and grunt and say,
Ugh, my dad put you up to this, didn't you? I knew it. I shouldn't have trusted you.
She then conjured a giant glacier of ice above them. This glacier of ice was even bigger than the ones that she has been making for Izuku to bench press. Izuku would use his psychokinesis to hold it up. Green light covered the iceberg. Everyone who saw this was amazed by Izuku's power. As Izuku continues to hold up the ice, Todoroki then started punching at Izuku's face with ice gauntlets covering her fists. Her punches were hard and strong. She was actually doing somewhat damage towards Izuku. He was impressed, but then he remembered that he was in a competition. Izuku then used his one free arm to use the ice against Todoroki by throwing bits and pieces of ice in front of her. She barely dodges. When she was away, Izuku spoke. No, Todoroki. I'm the one who wants you to use your fire side. This has nothing to do with your father. Yes, some time ago he asked me to convince you to use it, but I told him to back off. But before the sports festival, you said it yourself to go beyond plus ultra. But how are you yourself going to go beyond plus ultra if you only use one half of your power? How are you going to let such a beautiful element go to waste because it's something that you and your father share? Just because you're the daughter of someone that you hate, that doesn't mean that you're like him. Because it's not the power that makes you who you are. Not your father, not anyone who says so, not even your power. It's your choice. Hearing those words of wisdom opened Todo-chan's eyes. In her head, she remembered all the words of wisdom that her mother once shared with her. And when it ended, Todo-chan's left side activated. Her body was engulfed in flames from the seat area. Endeavor watched in bewilderment and said, Yes, let your power flow through you, my child. Todoroki then let out a huge gush of flames. Izuku was amazed and he smiled. Todo-chan then looked at Izuku and said, Thank you, Midoriya. With a flex of her left arm, She then threw a huge gush of fire towards Izuku. Izuku then continued to smile, and he flexed his arm upwards and he crossed his arms, allowing the fire to hit him. Todo-chan was concerned, for she think that she had hurt her friend. She then felt something touch her on the left side of her shoulder from the back. She turned around to see Izuku. He was okay. Izuku then says, "Now I can go plus ultra." Izuku's eyes then started glowing green, and he force-pushed Todoroki away with his psychokinesis. Todoroki then used ice to stop this from happening, but then she looked back up and noticed that Izuku wasn't holding his hands up with his psychokinesis. She looked up and noticed that the iceberg was far, far in the sky. They had a few minutes before it came back down. Izuku then turned his power up. The three rings then started moving up and down his body. He then lunged at Todoroki, and the two started fighting. Izuku threw the first hit, but Todo-chan conjured ice to block it. Izuku repeatedly punched the ice over and over again, and it was about to break after 3 hits. When it collapsed, it bursted with flames, and the impact threw Izuku back a little, and Todo-chan lunged at Izuku, landing a hit on him. Mostly Izuku could do would block, and when he saw his opening, he landed a punch on Todo-chan's stomach. The crowd gasped from what Izuku had done to this girl. Todo-chan would then fall to the ground in a lot of pain from the hit. Someone in the crowd shamed Izuku for hitting Todo-chan, and people would start booing him, but Izuku would not mind that at all. But Aizawa came to his defense, saying, "For those who are booing him, knock it off. He is fighting this girl as his opponent, not a girl." Izuku would say, "Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Before he could finish that sentence, Izuku was met with a fist of ice to the face. He then fell back as his lips started bleeding a little bit. He looked back up to see Todo-chan, who was furious, and she was ready to go ham on Izuku. She then leaped into the air, about to slam down on Izuku, but she missed when Izuku moved out of the way with a flip. Suddenly, Izuku's hand was engulfed with the green dust, with the gold dust, and he blowed it in Todo-chan's direction in an attempt to render her unconscious. But before it could reach Todoroki, once again she raised a sort of shield around her, but this time it was a bubble of sorts. From inside, she looked around for Izuku, but she could not spot him. She continuously looks around, only to find nothing. Suddenly, she feels a warm presence behind her inside the bubble. She then did a roundhouse kick, but then Izuku grabbed it in midair. Suddenly, from outside the bubble, it started to shine different colors from green, blue, and red. The bubble then started cracking piece by piece, slowly. "What is going on in there?" said Uraraka. Mineta then said, "Oh man, it's one of those situations where you can't see what's going on in the enclosed space, so you're forced to await and see what happens next. You're able to process it." With each light that passes, the ground then started to shake as if a giant was walking. Suddenly, the ice bursted with a light of green, and it blew up. The two teens were then flying high into the sky, upwards, Todo-chan had a few scrapes and bruises, while Izuku had minor scratches. As they continued to fly into the sky with Izuku's psychokinesis, Todo-chan was quickly regaining her breath. But then they looked up and saw that the iceberg was coming back down. They were in the path of its fall. They then looked at each other and then nodded their heads. They then looked back up. As the ice gets closer and closer, Todo-chan then blasted a huge gush of fire at it, and Izuku punched the giant glacier of ice, shattering it into billions of pieces, forming ice crystals that resemble snow. The crowd watched as the ice covered the two teens. They lost sight of them. As the ice continued to fall, they still weren't able to see. But then Endeavor spotted his daughter falling from the sky. She passed out and couldn't do anything to stop herself from falling. Endeavor then ran underneath her, ready to catch her. But then, before he could, she slowed down as her body was engulfed in the green light. As she levitated towards Izuku, who was floating as well, he takes Todoroki in his arms and he heals her. She slowly opens her eyes and looks to Izuku as the snow falls all around them.
Is Izuku?
Yeah, I'm here. Don't worry, we stopped it. Don't worry. Everyone who was watching was unsure of what to say or how to feel, but then, suddenly, from a few feet away, while still in midair, the fairies from the moors actually showed up, and they did their traditional song and dance, this time in midair next to the teens. Todoroki was surprised and said,
But wait, they're doing their dance. Isn't this breaking tradition?
Izuku said yes, but they said that they're willing to break the tradition for us. So, Todoroki, I'd like to ask you again. Would you care to dance with me? Todo-chan's eyes widen, and she would nod her head. She, Izuku would then grab her by the waist, and Todo-chan would cross her arms behind Izuku's neck, and they would dance in the air. Step by step, they turned and they twirled around as they continued to stare into each other's eyes. As the light reflected in their eyes, they could not look away from each other. But then Todo-chan closed her eyes. She then puckered her lips and leaned towards Izuku. She would then stop halfway. Izuku would then slowly lean towards her as well. He would hesitate for a second, but then he would lean forward and he would kiss her. The two of their lips touch each other as the snow falls, catching into their hair. The sunlight emerged through the clouds, shining at the two. From 1A, all the girls were cheering while the gentlemen were clapping for the two. Soon, everyone joined them in their cheering and clapping, all except for Endeavor. Was very furious that the boy he despised was kissing his daughter/masterpiece. As Izuku and Todoroki landed back on the ground, they finally separate from their kiss. They then meet each other's gaze, and Izuku says, "That actually felt really nice." The two smiled at each other, but then the moment was interrupted when Izuku felt a sort of presence coming at him from behind. He then conjured up a battle shield and he blocked the attack of a fireball that was heading towards him. They both look back and see a furious Endeavor. He started walking towards Izuku, and Izuku says, Give me 1 second, please. He then turned his attention to Endeavor and says, Now, Endeavor, I don't know why you're mad, but I'm going to need you to stop doing that. Otherwise, I'm going to have to put you down. Do you understand? Endeavor, in a fit of rage, then blasted another fireball at Izuku, but this time Izuku directed it in another direction and says, You have been warned. When he said that, Endeavor lunged at him with full force, and Izuku then conjured the golden dust in his hands, and then he blowed it in the direction of Endeavor, making him pass out. Endeavor floats there in midair asleep. He then turned his attention back to Toto-chan, and he would walk back towards her and say, How about we go do something after the sports festival? Toto-chan then says,
I can't wait.
Izuku says, Oh, and by the way, you stepped out of bounds. While smiling, Toto-chan looks down and she notices that she was out of bounds while Izuku was still technically in the ring.
Dang it.
Said Toto-chan. Midnight would declare Izuku the winner of this round, and the crowd would start cheering, and Izuku says, I better go get some sleep. You made me use half of my power today. Toto-chan then says,
Come here.
She then wrapped her arm around Izuku's and says, just in case you need some support. Izuku smiles, and together they escort each other to Recovery Woman's office. When he and Toto-chan reached Recovery Woman's office, Izuku laid down in the bed. Toto-chan then said, Can I get you anything? As Izuku lied there in the bed, he said, Will you stay with me? Toto-chan smiled and she laid down in the bed next to Izuku. As the two began to doze off, the TV was playing what was currently happening. The fights that was going on. It was Bakugo versus it was not yet. It was Bakugo versus Uraraka. Izuku couldn't help but notice something different about Bakugo's approach. He was fast and there was electricity emanating off of his body. Izuku says, Wow, Bakugo has gotten stronger. I can't wait to go up against him. About a minute later, his classmates entered the room, screaming and shouting for happiness that the two were back together again. But then, Recovery Woman shushed them and stepped aside to reveal that the two were sleeping. As they both laid there in the bed, Izuku had his arms crossed around Toto-chan, holding her close. Mina then said, Oh, these two are so cute together. I can't wait to see what happens next. A few minutes would pass, and Izuku would wake up from his slumber. Being as gentle as he could, he gets out of bed as to not wake her up. He then starts walking towards the door, but then he felt her grab him by the hand.
Where are you going?
Asked Toto-chan. Izuku then kneeled down and said, I have to go get ready for my fight with Bakugo.
Okay, but please be careful.
Don't worry, said Izuku. I will be. Now you just relax and enjoy the show. Izuku then kissed her on her forehead and leaves the room. When he stepped out of the room, he came across Kirishima being taken to Recovery Woman's office. He was burnt and bruised, like really badly. He sees Izuku and says, Oh, hey Midoriya, you're up. How are you feeling? I'm feeling better now, but what happened to you? Oh, well, I went up against Bakugo. I don't know what it was, but something about his quirk felt so much powerful. And he was so fast, and it might have been my imagination, but I think I saw electricity flying off of him. Interesting, said Izuku. Kirishima says, it might just be me, but something about his quirk almost resembles All Might's quirk. Izuku finally understands, and he says, oh, now I get it. Kirishima says, ouch. Anyway, I better get to recovery, woman. Good luck out there, Midoriya. Thank you, Kirishima. See you later. Izuku walks off, and we then cut to Bakugo and Izuku's fight. They stand on opposite sides of the field, awaiting for Midnight's signal. As the two stared each other down, Bakugo flexed his fingers, and Izuku twisted and turned at his neck a few times. Begin, said Midnight. The two boys then started charging at each other. Bakugo had electricity visibly flowing through his body, and Izuku had green light emanating off him. Then the two boys then clashed together, and Bakugo grunted, and Izuku whispered, "He gave it to you, didn't he?" "What do you mean?" said Bakugo. Izuku then pushed Bakugo a few feet away, and he charges at him while he's off guard, and putting him in a headlock and said, "All Might gave you his quirk, didn't he?" A surprised look comes across Bakugo's face, and he says, "How do you know that?" Izuku says, "He wanted to offer it to me, but I turned it down." Bakugo would ask, "Why did you turn it down?" "Because I have enough power as it is." Bakugo would then backhead Izuku, and Izuku would let him go. Bakugo then says, "Oh really? Well then, show me what you got." Izuku smiled and says, "As you wish." The three rings then floated up and down Izuku's body, and he was now at full power. He then stomped the ground and he caused it to crack into little square pieces. Oh wait, try again. He then stomps the ground and he manages to crack the concrete that was underneath them into giant square pieces. And then he used his psychokinesis to levitate the rocks into the air. Bakugo grabbed a hold of one of the rocks and he went up into the air with him. They both floated into the sky. All around them were giant squares of concrete. Izuku hid behind them to get the jump on Bakugo. Bakugo looked around, wondering where Izuku is. From behind him, Izuku was sneaking up on Bakugo when he accidentally made a noise. Bakugo heard it. Izuku then battered his arm back, about to strike Bakugo, but then Bakugo jumped out of the way, and Izuku smashed the concrete piece that Bakugo was on. Bakugo then retaliated, throwing an explosion, but Izuku managed to dodge it. Izuku quickly jumped onto another piece of concrete and then he hid. Bakugo, after a minute of doing this, Bakugo was getting furious and said, "Come out and face me!" When he said that, the concrete that surrounded both of them then formed a wider platform for them to stand on. Izuku then revealed himself and said, "And face you I shall." Hand-to-hand combat? Izuku then raised his fist in the air. Bakugo then smiled and he raised his fist, readied himself. The two would then exchange blows to each other. From down below, other people had a hard time seeing what was going on. From the highest deck, they were able to see, unlike the ones who were down below. Izuku was surprised at how fast and strong Bakugo had gotten. When Izuku saw his opening, he then took his opportunity and landed a punch on Bakugo's chest. The punch was strong that Bakugo nearly slided off the platform. It took him a few seconds to regain his composure, but he got back up. Izuku says, "Whoa, you took that hit very well. You certainly have gotten stronger over the last time we fought, Kachan. But let's see how well you handled this." Without even warning, Izuku then raised his right foot into the air and then he stomped the ground, causing it to shake like an earthquake. Bakugo loses his balance and Izuku ran in and punched Bakugo over and over again, not even giving him a chance to find his opening. Eventually, Bakugo spitted out his own blood. Izuku sees this and he says, "Do you give up?" Bakugo spits out what was left of his blood, and he wiped his face clean. With a flex of his fingers, Bakugo's hands started to engulf with explosions, and electricity surfed through his body. "So be it," said Izuku. Izuku then activated his magic, and raising his hands into the air, he conjures a giant tree snake. It slithered from the ground underneath them and circulated around the ring that they were fighting on. Bakugo blew himself directly at Izuku. Izuku then battered his fist back and was ready to strike. As the boys get closer to each other, it looked like their fists were about to clash once again, but then Bakugo managed to land a punch on Izuku's face this time. Izuku was sliding backwards and would have fallen off of the ring if it weren't for the tree snake. "Damn, that actually hurts," said Izuku. Bakugo then charged once again, but this time he was stopped by Izuku's tree snake. It lunged itself at Bakugo and almost got him, but he jumped out of the way into the air using an explosion. The snake then follows Bakugo upwards. It got closer and closer, but Bakugo blew an explosion in its face, causing it to fall back down to the ground with a loud thud. While using his explosions to levitate himself into the air, Bakugo looked for Izuku, but he was out of sight. Where did he go? Did he fall off? Suddenly, from above, a crow was circulating above Bakugo. The crow then started squawking and pecking at Bakugo. "Hey, go away, you damn bird!" Suddenly, the bird was engulfed in a green light. It would change its shape, and Izuku would emerge from it and say, "What did you call me?" Bakugo, with a surprised tone in his voice, would say, "Izuku? You can turn yourself into animals?" "Yes, I can. And you called me a bird? Well, guess what? I'm not a bird. I'm a drake dragon." Izuku then turned himself into a drake dragon. This particular dragon had very thick scales, and he had horns on one on each side of his head. He even had spikes that went down with his spinal. He even had a tail that resembled a mermaid's. Izuku uses his weight to push Bakugo back down onto the ring. Inside his head, Bakugo says, "How the hell am I supposed to fight a dragon? I have to let him come at me first, study his movements. Maybe he'll show his weakness spot somewhere." "Well, here goes nothing," said Bakugo. Izuku then charged at his opponent. He jumped into the air while he spinned around and flexed his tail out, whacking Bakugo. The impact was so powerful that it was great enough to knock Bakugo off of the stage. but he used his explosions to get back onto it again. Izuku then pounded the ground, causing a small earthquake, and bits and pieces of rocks popped from the ground, and he used his tail to swing those rocks at Bakugo, causing him to barely dodge, but he was able to get a hit on him. While he was distracted, Dragon Izuku then charged at Bakugo, and Bakugo jumped on his back. He saw his opportunity and he went ham, letting off explosions on Izuku's back. But it really disturbed him the most when he hit him in the tail. But Bakugo did not notice that. Izuku then jumped and spun around, trying to get Bakugo off of him. He was successful. Some people were amazed of what they were seeing, while some were unable to even make out what was going on up there. Their fight continues, and Izuku battered his neck back, and then he jolted forward as he breathed fire towards Bakugo. The fire then came in contact with Bakugo's nitroglycerin sweat, and an involuntary explosion happened. The explosion was somewhat devastating enough that it forced Izuku to revert back into his normal self. Both of the boys were falling, appearing to be unconscious. Toto-chan then saw that Izuku had fallen asleep, and she yelled,
"Wake up!"
Izuku opened his eyes, and he levitated himself before he could touch the ground. Luckily, he caught himself in time. Wow, that was really a close one. From the opposite side of the arena, explosions can be heard, for Bakugo was using them to keep himself upwards. Both of the boys stared at each other as their shirts were burned. Izuku saw no point of keeping his shirt on, so he teared it off, and so did Bakugo, doing the same thing. Both of the boys stared at each other, and Bakugo taunted at Izuku to come and fight more. Raising his left hand up, he then gestured Izuku to come over. And so they did. When the boys met in the middle, they both clashed once again, causing the dirt on the ground to fly all over the place. They then took their fight to the sky, and with each spot that they went to, it would cause like a sort of loud explosion and force pushing some clouds into a circle. Eventually, this goes on for a few minutes, and the two boys were getting tired. Izuku was at the lower ground while Bakugo remained upwards. Both of them were really tired. Bakugo then says, "I'm getting tired of this. It's time to end this once and for all." Bakugo then said, "Hoitzer, impact." While still in the air, Bakugo then used his explosions to twist and turn himself at a fast pace, and what looked like smoke to be surrounding his body. And then he redirected himself at Izuku. Izuku then gets an idea. Taking a deep breath, Izuku prepares himself as Bakugo gets closer and closer. Izuku then extends both of his arms out towards Bakugo, and he waits for the right opportunity. And as Bakugo gets closer, he lets off an explosion, and Izuku caught his arm in a magical barrier around his arm. I clarified that twice, I gotta keep going. Suddenly, everyone was blinded by a green and yellow light. When the two clashed, a loud bang can be heard from miles away. The boys were tossing, turning, flipping on the ground on opposite sides of the stadium. When it happened, Toto-chan screamed Izuku's name, hoping that he was okay. She then jumped down from her seated area and ran towards him, laying on the ground, motionless. When she reached him, she turned him from his stomach onto his back, and she said,
Izuku, are you okay?
Izuku then grunted and slowly started to move and said, yeah, I'm fine.
Oh, thank goodness.
From the other side of the stadium, Bakugo's screams can be heard. He screamed at the top of his lungs. Everyone who saw what had happened to him was bewildered and they yelled for a doctor to come and help him. Everyone started screaming and panicking. What happened? Said Izuku. From the other side of the stadium, Bakugo rolled over, revealing a horrifying discovery, for his right hand was missing. He held on to his dismembered body part as blood started to ooze from his wound, and his bone can be seen. Izuku was shocked. He didn't mean that to happen. He knew that he had to help him, but he couldn't get up, and he felt so drained of his magic, but he felt like he had to try something. He then looked to Todo-chan and said, "Help me get to him." Todo-chan then said,
Okay, but be careful.
She helped him get up, and together they walked towards Bakugo. Recovery Woman and every other hero with a rejuvenation quirk came over to try and help Bakugo. But when Izuku and Todo-chan got closer, pro heroes such as Death Grips or Arms, whatever his name is, Mount Lady, and Kamuri Woods came over to prevent Izuku from getting any closer, for they thought that he was going to hurt Bakugo. But Izuku persisted, saying, "What? But I want to help him." But they weren't listening to him. They would tell Izuku to back down. But then Mr. Aizawa spoke over the intercom, telling them to back off and let him help. But all the heroes would object to this. And then All Might, the number one hero, even came down and told them to step aside and let him help. But yet they still wouldn't let him. The heroes and All Might started arguing back and forth. Izuku looked to Bakugo on the ground. He showed so much signs of pain, and he felt so guilty because he felt like he's the one who did this to him. This sends fury throughout Izuku's body, and he yells out, "I'm trying to save my friend's arm, and you won't let me do that? As far as I see here, I am the only one who can recover his lost limb." Suddenly, Izuku started glowing with a green aura, and his irises started glowing a brighter green. This puts the heroes, except for All Might, on defense towards Izuku. Getting more and more angry, he says, "Now shut up, move aside, and let me heal my friend for the love of God!" Suddenly, Izuku's aura started spreading out everywhere. The heroes then charged at Izuku, but they were slowing down. Izuku notices this and says, "What the hell is going on here?" Then they all stopped completely, frozen in place. Did I do this? Izuku then looked to Todo-chan. She had a worried look on her face. Izuku wasn't sure if she could hear him or not, but he said, "It's gonna be okay. I promise." While everyone was frozen, Izuku then limped his way to Bakugo and got on his knees and tried to use his magic, but he felt so drained of his magic that he felt like he couldn't. "Come on, Izuku. You gotta fix this. You can do this. Just do it." Izuku then hovered both of his hands over the missing arm of Bakugo and says, "You just gotta go beyond." Taking a deep breath, he then says, "Plus Ultra!" Suddenly, Izuku blew up with magic emanating all over his body. He dug deep down and Bakugo's arms started healing back to normal, but Izuku felt like his brain was being put through a shredder. And then his nose started bleeding. "Come on, just a little more. Come on, Izuku. Go, 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 go." Bakugo's hand was then restored back to normal, and Izuku fell to his side right next to Bakugo. Suddenly, time started moving slowly again, and eventually it went back to its normal pace. One of the heroes then says, "Wait, where did he go?" They turned around and then they spotted him passed out next to Bakugo. We fade to black. And then reappear in what looks like a hospital. Izuku wakes up. His head was banging and his vision was blurry for a second. Oh, where am I? Next to him was a heart monitor. It was 12 in the afternoon. What happened to me? Izuku then got out of his bed, but his knees nearly gave away and he almost fell. He looked out the window and saw that he was really high up. Where am I? What am I doing here? From outside, Izuku heard the familiar voices. He walked towards the door and he opened it to see most of his classmates and a doctor stopping them in their tracks. "I'm sorry, I just can't let you see him right now,"
But why not?
asked Todoroki. The doctor says, "Well, he needs more time to rest," and the doctor was interrupted when Mina said,
Hey, look, he's up and walking.
Todoroki then gasped and said,
Izuku!
She then ran over and tightly embraced Izuku. "Thank God, I'm so happy you're awake now." Izuku says, "Well, how long have I been asleep?"
You've been asleep for 2 days.
"Really? I never slept that long before." They both were approached by the rest of their classmates, all of them happy that Izuku was okay. Izuku then remembered Bakugo, and he didn't see him there. "Oh wait, where's Kachan?" Todo-chan says,
He's alright. After you healed his arm, he went home. We saw him the next day, but I could tell that there was something on his mind.
Uraraka then got in the conversation saying,
And Ida had a family emergency. Well, we haven't seen him.
Izuku says, "Oh well, I hope they're alright. I gotta, I gotta say, Kachan really gave me a run for my money. He made me end up using all my magic." "Oh, so who won the sports festival?" Todo-chan
Says, well, after all the catastrophe and smoke that you two caused, they were unable to identify who won, so they decided that it was a draw.
"Oh well, I'm fine with that. I just wish Kachan was here." Looking over, from around the corner, he stood there, Bakugo, with a blank look on his face, as if he was unsure of what to say or what to do. Izuku then said, "Well, well, speak of the devil." He walked over to Bakugo and said, "Hey, Kachan, how are you doing?" Bakugo stood there, not saying anything. Izuku then spoke, "I do hope that your arm is doing fine." Bakugo then raised his hand up and said, "Yeah, it's fine." Izuku then said, I gotta say, you really have gotten stronger over a short amount of time. You actually made me use up all my magic. I'm very impressed. Take pride in that. You're the only person in the world that made me go all out." Bakugo then said, "Don't give yourself the short stick. You made me use up all my power too. The first time we fought, I thought I didn't have a chance in hell in defeating you. But I now consider us equals. But don't get me wrong. I'm still gonna grow stronger than you, so you better not slack off." Izuku smiled and says, "The same goes for you." Izuku then raised his right hand into the air and Bakugo shook it with his right hand. We then skipped to the next day. Izuku was at the prison visiting his dad. They would talk about the sports festival and how Hasashi is proud of his son for doing his best. When their conversation on that topic ended, Izuku finally decided to tell his father about the thing. Hey, Hasashi? Yes, son? What would you say if I told you I could go back in time and save Mom? Hasashi thinks for a second and he says, well, before I answer, could I get a little more details? Well, you see, I have a magic mirror that has the ability to take me back in time, and I have it all planned out. You see, I could go back to the day of my birth, and I can give you the money that you need. So that way you don't end up robbing the store and killing that old man. It could work out for all of us. A moment of silence brushes by, and Hasashi has a face of doubt. Izuku says, Hasashi, aren't you happy? We could be a family again. Isn't that what you want? Hasashi says, we are a family, Izuku. But god damn it, I would give up my life for just one day for your mother to be here with us. But if it's true of what you're saying, what if it changes too much? What if it changes you? Well, if it means that we could be a family again, I don't mind that at all. But son, what if you end up losing all the things that you've worked so hard to achieve? Well, then I'm willing to start over again. Son, look, things happen for a reason. Yes, your mother's death was an unforeseen set of circumstances, but some people just die, son. And we can't change the past. Now, I understand that you have that power, but if it's true what you're saying, if your mother had a saying in this, if she knew that you going back in time and changing the past would change about what makes you so special, she would not want you to do it. And if I had to be honest, son, no one in the world should have that power. Not even you. Hasashi smiles and he says, I am in so much awe of the remarkable man that you're becoming now. And I could tell from the fight that you had with that Todoroki girl that you're in love with her. I can't express how proud I am of you, son. Tears fall down from Izuku's eyes, and Hasashi says, son, look at me. Izuku hesitates to look up, but then he does. Hasashi says, son, the one thing that I want to happen to you the most in the world is that one day you will become a father yourself. And it will be at that moment, son, when you get the chance to hold your child in your arms, you will come to see how much me and your mother truly love you. Izuku tears up even more. We then fade to black and then reappear at the castle. Izuku stood in front of the magic mirror. He informed Diaval that he might end up doing it, and that he did not want to be disturbed. Diaval would then beg Izuku not to go through with it, but Izuku persists. Staring into his reflection at the mirror, he was reflecting on his dad's wisdoms and his words. Izuku was thinking, why wouldn't a husband want his wife back? But to some extent, he is right. But if I go back that far, I might end up changing too much. So, I'll just have to save Mom. That shouldn't change too much, I hope. He felt ready to use the magic mirror, but he felt like he had to tell someone else about what he planned on doing. And so, he called Toto-chan, and she didn't answer the phone, so he decided to use the mirror to open a portal to her bedroom. She lied there in her bed, reading until Izuku called her name. Todoroki. She jolted with fright and says,
Oh, Izuku, you scared me.
I'm sorry, it's just I need to talk to you. Can you come over?
Yeah, okay.
She walks through the portal and they share a hug and kiss.
So, what's on your mind?
Izuku says, well, first, where's your phone? Todo-chan says,
My dad took it. He really doesn't want me talking to you.
Izuku chuckles, and he goes on to tell her about the magic mirror's ability to take him back in time. He also goes on to tell her that he was going to go back and save his mom from the truck. And that he's torn between whether to do it or not. Todo-chan takes everything in. She says,
I see. I understand why you want to do it, but what if you never end up meeting me in the future?
Izuku then places a hand on her face, and he says, no matter what changes or where I go, I will always find a way to find you. Todo-chan then drops a tear, and she says,
I think you should do it. I want nothing else in this world other than to see you happy. So, go back and save your mom and live a happy life. Just promise you'll find me again.
Izuku then promised her that he will. The two would then share a passionate kiss, and after a minute goes by, Izuku says, will you stay and watch? She nodded her head, and Izuku stood in front of the mirror, ready. His hands emanated the green light, and then he moved his hands in a smooth circular motion. Suddenly, the ground started to shake, and Todo-chan nearly lost her balance and grabbed a hold of something to stabilize her. Are you okay? Asked Izuku.
Yeah, I'm fine. Just keep going.
Izuku then turned his attention back to the mirror. He then battered both of his arms back, and he palmed the mirror. The mirror then started shaking and rapidly showing flashy images in different colors. Izuku then said, look away from the mirror. She looked away from the mirror, closing her eyes. After a few seconds, the flashy images had come to an end, and Izuku saw the freeway him and his mother were on. It was a few minutes after they left the doctor's office. Izuku stares off into the mirror while Todo-chan was amazed by everything. She then says,
Was that the day?
Izuku nodded his head, but he stood there not moving. Todo-chan sees this and she says,
Izuku, if you're going to go back and save your mother, you need to do it now.
Izuku then slowly started phasing into the mirror. In the past, a portal opened up behind a big rock above a grassy hill just next to the freeway. Luckily, nobody saw it. Izuku emerges from it. From the distance, Izuku saw All Might, and looking over, he saw his mother for the first time in forever. Mom. A tear runs down his face, but then he heard the familiar sounds of an oncoming truck. Izuku looked in the distance, and there he saw it, the big red truck, and Muscular driving it with his mask on, running straight towards his young self and his mother. Izuku had to do something. He then raised his hands up to stop the truck, but his magic didn't activate. He hesitated. In his mind, he says, why can't I do it? From that hesitation, the truck then bashed into the first few cars, and it was getting closer and closer to Izuku's mom. Izuku's hands then started glowing, but nothing happened because he hesitates again. The words of his father's, the words, if your mother had a saying in this, If she knew that you going back in time and changing the past would change about what makes you so special, she would not want you to do it. He even thinks about all the things he's gained and all the friends he's made. Was he really willing to say goodbye to all of the people that he's come to love? The truck is seconds away from hitting Inko. This is his last chance to save her. From the other side of the portal, Toto-chan was watching and notices Izuku's hesitation.
Come on, Izuku, just do it.
Back to Izuku. If his mother dies, then he won't have another chance, for he can't resurrect the dead. He then readies his magic, but he heard his father's words once again. The one thing that I want to happen to you the most in the world is that one day you will become a father yourself. And it will be at that moment, son, when you get the chance to hold your child in your arms, you will come to see how much me and your mother truly love you. He then falls to his knees and he cries, pounding the grassy ground underneath him. As he closes his eyes, he hears the impact of the truck hitting all the cars that was in front of him, including the car with his mother in it. The truck continues to ride down the lane, leaving Inko behind in her car, and a passed out young Izuku on the ground. Toto-chan did not see the truck hit the cars, but what she did see was a look of regret and despair on Izuku's face. Izuku got up from his hiding spot and he went over to what was left of his mom's car. Izuku reaches her, and he couldn't help but stare at the huge dent on the front of what once was their mother's car. He looks inside. His mom was laying there motionless. As a tear runs down his face, he ripped the door off the car and carried his mother to the side. When he laid her down, his tear fell onto his mother's face. Izuku then laid his mom over his knees. He held her head up to his face and said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Suddenly, Izuku heard his mom cough. For a brief second, she sprang back to life. Izuku was bewildered that his mom was still alive. When she looked up, she saw a grown-up Izuku, but at first she didn't see that at first. Her voice was so weak it was hard to hear her. She speaks. "Excuse me. Is my son is my is my son okay?" Izuku nodded his head and said, "Yes, ma'am. Your son's okay. You saved his life. You're a real hero." Inko said, "No. No, I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother worried for her child." She looked closer at this mysterious figure, and she realizes that it's her son, but older. She then said, "Izuku, is that you?" "Yes, Mom. It's it's me." "Oh my. You're so big and tall. But your hair, you need to brush it a little bit." "Yeah, I'd ask you how are you here, but I fear that I'm running out of time." She gives out a few coughs and says, "Are you eating every day?" Izuku couldn't help but cry even more, and during his crying, it always disrupted him from talking. "Yes, I'm eating every day. Are you being a good boy? Yes. Izuku had one more chance to save his mom. All he had to do was heal her, and she'll be fine. I can't do it, said Izuku. Izuku cries harder than before, but his mom comforts him, wiping away his tears. She says, shh, it's okay. Mommy's here. Mommy's got you. I guess it's true what that woman said on your birthday. You really are something extraordinary. I love you, Izuku. Izuku then sniffed and said, I love you too, Mom. Goodbye. And with that, Ingo succumbs to her injuries and dies. And Izuku is now completely alone. Izuku cries for a minute, and after that, he was ready to leave. Walking back through his portal back to his time, he then walked into the arms of Todo-chan. They hugged for a while. Todo-chan then asks,
But why? Why did you let her go?
Izuku, while looking at the ground, says, do you remember when I said I thought I had no one to come back to? He slowly looks up at her and he says, I came back for you. She then brought Izuku back in for a hug. This goes on for a while and Izuku says, hey, I need you to stand back for a second.
Why? What are you about to do?
Don't worry. It's just something that I need to do. Todo-chan then stands back, sorry. Izuku then takes a deep breath, and in a fit of rage, he grabs the nearest chair and he smashes the mirror, destroying it with one hit. Bits and pieces of the mirror fall to the ground. Todo-chan would then asks,
Why did you destroy the mirror?
Izuku then puts the chair down while his back is turned against Todo-chan, and he says, because if I didn't, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. No one in the world should have this ability. So, I destroyed it. Izuku starts to tear up and he says, don't worry. I can still take you home. Izuku then starts crying, but then he was comforted by Todo-chan hugging him from behind. She then said,
I want to stay with you.
thank you, said Izuku. And so, Izuku took Todo-chan to his bed and they shared a passionate kiss for a while. They then laid down in the bed and they snuggled close together and rest for the rest of the night. Izuku then woke up to the light of the sun hitting him in the face. Looking down, he sees Todo-chan. Even while she's asleep, she's still beautiful. Izuku uses his new ability to teleport out of the bed as to not wake up Todo-chan. Suddenly, Izuku's phone started ringing, and he quickly picks it up, stopping the ringtone. He looks down, and the caller ID says, Todoroki. Strange, she is in my bed. I wonder who this could be. He leaves the room and he answers the phone. Hello? On the other line was Endeavor, the flame hero himself. He says, Izuku Midoriya? Yes, who's this? Endeavor says, this is Endeavor, the flame hero. Oh, hi Endeavor. Hey, I do hope that you're not still mad at me, although I'm not for sure why, but I do hope you're not. Endeavor then said, that's besides the point. Where's my daughter? I did not see her last night, and I called her other friends. They don't know. You're the last person I wanted to call, but I don't seem to have a choice, so I ask you, where is she? Izuku said, "Oh, well, there's no need to worry, Mr. Todoroki. She is in my bed right now." A moment of silence goes by, and Endeavor says, "What?" She is sleeping in my bed right now. We spent the night together." Endeavor then huffs and puffs, and Izuku didn't hear him speak until Endeavor exploded, saying, "You bastard, if you had sex with my daughter, I will cremate you into oblivion. I will burn down wherever you live. I will." Endeavor was interrupted when Izuku said, Izuku interrupts Endeavor, saying, "Endeavor, I don't see what the problem is. After we fought at the sports festival, we slept together in the nurse's office."
You what?
Endeavor then said, "You what? You son of a..." And Izuku then hung up the phone before he could finish that sentence, while saying, "Man, I wonder what his problem is." While he walks, he feels relief, as if a lot of weight has been taken off of his shoulders. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his mother's death and how she was taken away from him. For the first time in forever, Izuku finally had other life things on his mind, and he was able to smile. He suddenly felt a strange jolt in his back, and at the same time, he heard a loud thud coming from his room. Izuku's eyes then widen from bewilderment, and he says, "No way." He then raced back to his room, pulling the secret lever, revealing the secret room with his wings in the glass box. The wings then jolted while Izuku felt the strange feeling in his back again. He looked up in bewilderment and says, "No way. I'm almost ready?" We then slowly zoom in towards the wings as the screen fades to black. And that is where I am going to end this story. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Please give it a thumbs up. Comment a hero name for Izuku. And if you made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #bless. And I will see you all in the next episode. Goodbye.